All right. So thank you again for being here with me with my to present to my to talk to my 5:30 class. They also have been broken into groups and they're working on different projects. They have selected a developing country to focus on providing a solution. They were able to pick out whatever problem they wanted to solve. That's the one that they've been working on. So we'll get a chance to talk about that, and I'll have them share on what they're working with on currently. But first, I would like to start with how did you get into the social impact field?
Well,
First of all, who are you, and then how did you get in?
absolutely. Well, it's great to be here, Atiba, with you and your cohort with your students. Thanks for spending this afternoon or this early evening with me. I got into international development and social impact almost by accident. The area where I specialize in is youth development, which is so broad. And to be honest with you, the only real qualification or the best qualification I had when I got into the space was that I was a youth myself. I was
Mm,
younger than 25 years of age when I started this. And I met the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, which is like the World Bank, but for Latin America and the Caribbean. It's owned by 48 countries. He was really curious to discuss with me how I felt as a young person, because at that time in 1994, over 70% of the population of Latin America and the Caribbean was under 25 years of age. So it was a young region. And the bank, of course, does these big, giant multilateral development loans to the countries who are the clients. So the youth are the beneficiaries through the trickle down effect, but they're not necessarily involved in the development process. So what we wanted to do as a bank was bring them in, bring in their thoughts and bring in their interests and their participation into this whole thing. So it was almost by accident. I started a 6 month. That's why things, you never know how things are going to turn out. I started a 6 month contract and woke up one day and it was 25 years later.
mm, thank you. Can you tell us about some of the partnerships that you formed and different impact projects that you've worked on?
Sure, absolutely. One of the things that we learned is that young people, especially youth at risk, and especially youth that haven't had the fair shakes of an education, if you talk to them about a workforce development program or an education program, and if they only had the equivalent of a fourth or fifth grade education, you might not capture their interest. But if you talk about things that they're passionate about, like sports, that can also teach you life lessons, you use that as a hook. And in 1997, I had an interesting meeting with the Minister of Sport of Brazil. Perhaps you guys have heard of him. His name is Pele. He was a great soccer player. And Pele was the Minister of Sport of Brazil. And he came to me and he said, Fabian, sports and especially soccer or football, as we call it, is such an important tool for development. And people love it. And it's you can learn so many life lessons from it. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? What are you talking about? He's like, well, team sports. You learn how to communicate. You learn how to win, but you also learn how to lose. You learn dignity. You learn inclusion. You learn respect. You learn sharing. You learn competition, and it's healthy. And I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. And he said, we can use this as a platform to draw these youth at risk in and teach them through these life skills that they can use to enter the workforce. And then we can bring in private companies that would hire these young people and teach them how to sell or create or produce their product. So one of the first big partnerships that I was very proud of was a partnership with Pelé, with the country of Brazil, and with an organization which is very popular now and in a lot in the news, which is called FIFA. And FIFA is the world governing body of football. Sorry, soccer as it's called in the United States, but we call it football. I'm from Argentina, so I'm a little proud because my country is the defending world champions and the World Cup's coming up. So FIFA was our first experimental partner, and what FIFA provided was not just the access to the game, to what they call the beautiful game, but also access to coaches, to trainers, to skills sets where young people can learn how to work as a team, work and participate and do playing, which is important, but also learn how to take those lessons. And FIFA was interested in this because our bank is an intergovernmental bank, so they wanted the relationships with the governments and the resources, and also look good from a corporate social responsibility perspective, which we call CSR. So I'm very proud of the FIFA project, which was so successful. We brought in interesting partners like Nike, Coca-Cola, Gatorade, Kellogg's, General Motors, and that other big sports took an interest in what we were doing. So we created partnerships with the International Olympic Committee, with the NFL, with the Major League Baseball, and with the National Basketball Association, with the NBA, which was really interesting. Using sports, and not just these athletes who are committed to the game, but also athletes that are committed to make their communities better. So that's one of the programs, the public-private partnerships that I'm really proud of. You're on mute, Atima.
Thank you. So, can you tell, is it hard to figure out who to partner with, and you know, like how do you match corporations with
It's super.
nonprofits?
It's super. It could be super complicated, but you have to have a common goal. First of all, you have to have something that, if you're developing from a governmental and banking side, that you think would be of interest to these potential partners. For instance, we did a digital divide program where we were teaching young kids and providing them access to computers. So a natural partner there was Dell, and then a natural partner was also Microsoft, which helped us combat the digital divide. Now, Microsoft, of course, they want, at the end of the day, they're a company and they want more Windows users and they want to sell more software. But in order to do that, they have to have people that know how to use the software. So we were learning how to bridge the digital divide and take advantage of Microsoft's goodwill for that type of partnership. Coca-Cola wants more people to drink Coca-Cola. We had a big partnership in Rio with Visa, which the big credit card company, and because of the Olympics, they were really interested in doing some corporate social responsibility. And so we said, okay, Visa, what you guys can do is you can teach financial literacy. And at the end of the day, they're a company. So what they want are more Visa users, more credit card users. But if they can learn to teach, and this is a funny anecdote, when we were working on this project in Rio before the Olympics in Rio, one of Visa's important spokespeople is Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimmer. And he wanted to participate and volunteer his time into this corporate social responsibility. And he wanted to give swimming lessons. But the problem was that in the community where we were working, they didn't have a swimming pool. So we had to build one in less than 10 days so he could jump in and teach the kids how to swim. So that was another interesting side of, nice extra that the community got as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to open it up because I could ask so many questions, but I'm going to open it up to y'all. So who wants to go first in asking their question? Okay, so then I'll.
Divya has a question, I believe.
Oh, okay.
Hi. So I wanted to ask from your experience in Latin America, since you also said you're from Argentina,
Hmm.
in the development work and everything, what are like the biggest challenges on young entrepreneurs face when trying to solve a social issue? Like you also mentioned how you started at such a young age as well.
There are many challenges, and you bring up a really good question. One of the biggest challenges is education and getting the resources that they need to do this, the proper skill set to start their own business. And then once they have an idea, it's really challenging. And a lot of challenges that they face are from a policy side and from a licensing side. It's hard, in the United States and in other countries, you can easily open up a new business and become an entrepreneur. You create your limited liability corporation, you become incorporated and so forth and so on, and you can get this process rolling. A lot of young people, not just young people, but business community in general, have a lot of challenges in getting starting up their idea or their social impact project.
Thank you. Sarah, I saw you put a question in the block, in the box, the chat box.
Yeah, hi. I don't know if my background's really loud, um, but my question was, what was the toughest barrier that you faced, and then how did you realize how to break that barrier?
The toughest barrier that I had to face was really, really scary and really, really challenging. And a project that I had in Medellin, in Colombia, it was during the drug wars, and a lot of the youth couldn't communicate or go to the programs because they were blocked by the gangs. So that was a huge physical barrier and mental barrier and real barrier that we had to address. So we had to bring these communities together, and we had to work with all of the, on both sides, and telling them and convincing them that it wasn't a bad thing, it wasn't an invasion, it wasn't something that would affect them badly, but it was something that would help them. So incorporating them into the process. So there's a lot of community challenges that have that exist for different reasons, whether it's educational reasons or lack of resources or so forth. So so young people, unfortunately, and I hate this term, and I didn't invent it, but I came across a lot of, if it bleeds, it leads. Young people are in the media, they're in the news. They make the news cycle if something bad happens, not necessarily if they're doing good things or rewarded for a good service that they're doing. So unfortunately, a lot of the barriers were physical and violence issues.
Thank you. Next question. I think it's William.
Hi, I was wondering what kind of corporations come to you for your work with your lab?
Well, that's a really good question. A lot of technology corporations. We work with Microsoft. We work with Dell. We work with a lot of AI companies right now. ChatGPT, we're doing some interesting projects, and that's a whole new can of worms. I mean, Perplexity is an AI company that we're working with, and we work with a lot of leagues. We're working with FIFA, we're working with the NFL, with the National Basketball Association. We also work with large international organizations like UNICEF and the United Nations and the World Bank. And we work with sporting companies like Nike, Adidas, Gatorade, Coca-Cola, Pepsi-Cola. So it's a wide range of clients. So far so good.
I think Jose is next.
Sir, what do you think is the biggest issue with these young entrepreneurs addressing big corporations? They're like their faults and the changes that they make, like being able to come up to them and be like, hey, you need to reorganize how you do things because the way you're doing it right now is not working or like is not ethical or optimal.
I think a lot of the challenges that they're facing, well, there are many. A lot of the big ones are getting the seed funding to get their idea started and financially set. And some of the times it's the corporations that's not giving them the space or the time. So I think it's a two-way street. I think that the young people have to work on, for the young entrepreneurs have to work on their pitch and have to work on their fundraising plan, and make that a lot, firm that up, so the companies that are investing in these things can see tangible reasons, and looking at what the KPIs are. Have you guys heard of the expression KPI? Key performance indicators. What are that? So in other words, what bang are they going to get for the buck? And I think it's unfair for a lot of young people, because a lot of the things that I've seen, and I'm generalizing, and I hate to generalize, but sometimes you have to, is they're not taken seriously. I mean, a lot of these corporations, the ones that are doing really, really well, are ones that took chances. I mean, you have to take chances, and there's not one recipe that I would suggest. I mean, there's obviously doing your homework and knowing what you're doing, what you're selling, what you're producing, or what service you're providing. And another is luck. I mean, luck and timing. Timing has a lot to do with it as well. But perseverance is so important, because a lot of the successful stories haven't been the first time successes, but rather going back to the drawing board many, many times.
Thank you. All right. So now I want to transition to, I want each group member to share their country and solution, what you found out about it, and then what you're thinking about your solution to get feedback. Okay. So group 9 is first, and all of y'all need to be putting your group numbers in and be prepared to be called on. Group 9, Arthur.
Hello. So our country is Papua New Guinea, and we're trying to. Sorry, what are we? What do you want us to say? Like what we're trying to use AI to solve?
Yes. Uh-huh.
To
Yeah. your country, what you're trying to,
Papua New Guinea.
yeah.
Yes, we're trying to solve like water access issues in Papua New Guinea, like especially in more rural areas. So we were trying to use, or we'd like to use like, like a model to predict, to take data in and predict where like well locations would, good well locations would be. So that way you could save money with instead of surveying, you would just simply use our app, and this would save money for the people. And also they have a lot of like road access issues. So that way they wouldn't have to worry about like bringing people in from like, let's say the city or something. They could just, oh, like go on their phone, go on their computer, and then just be like, oh, pop a well here. And yeah, that's kind of the main idea.
I think that's a great idea, and I like the fact that you're making it local in the sense that you're bringing in the community because you're bringing them into the mix because that's really important. Is not just to get their buy-in, but make them important stakeholders in the process. I think that's really important, and obviously that's a huge issue where you can also get resources. And you brought up a really interesting point, which is data. I don't know if you guys have heard this expression, but data is the new currency. I mean, data is what's valuable to corporations, to countries, to governments, to basically everyone, especially with AI and what's happening with artificial intelligence. I mean, data is data gathering, data mining, data sweeping. That's so important. And one of the things that I would also recommend, because it's you're creating an app, is making it user friendly. Of course, you're thinking about that, but not just making it accessible, but make it easy to understand.
Hmm.
I think that's a great topic that you chose and such an important one.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Group number one.
So, our group is doing a project focusing on Tacna, Peru, where many streets they lack the proper ramps accessibility, making it more difficult for them to get places for people that are handicapped, for example. And our project is inspired in something called INI, which is like today is for you and tomorrow is gonna be for me. So our idea is to create a solution that supports communities while also engaging with these users. And it is an AI powered platform that it will identify the areas that need the ramps and it will help report the accessibility issues and it will connect with people and organizations to take the action to build a ramp in a place that is needed, for example. Um, and basically, like, what would you like recommend also is the most important step to ensure data driven, like connecting with the another group said as well, because this is a lot of data involved. And of course, we want to make sure it's like well connected and we don't have any type of leaks and stuff like that.
I think that's a super. I so in full disclosure, I've worked a lot in Peru and I've been to Peru a lot, so I can not only just understand the challenge and what you're tackling, but I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand. And accessibility is such an important topic and such an important area. I think you're not going to have any problems. I think you'll be very successful in reaching the investors and in reaching the buy-in because you want to bring in the communities and you've already discussed that, which is super important. And you brought up transportation and accessibility, correct? I think that's a very important area because I don't know if you guys knew this, but do you take a guess of what the largest cause of death is among young people? Traffic accidents, road safety. Road safety issues is such a huge issue. So you're bringing up something that has a problem, and you're talking about the connectivity issue. So I think Peru is a good place to pilot your program because Peru is one of the countries that was an early gainer and early in the game of connectivity, and they were very famous before everyone had internet. They had the internet cafes. So I think with the satellite access that there is in Peru, I think you'll be just fine.
Thank you. Group number four.
Hi. So our group number four, we're concentrating in Bogota, Colombia, and we chose SDG 11, which is Sustainable Cities and Communities. And with that, we kind of went back and forth initially, trying to see if we concentrate more on like traffic, like you said, based on the statistic, infrastructure, or I guess just having more sustainable, I guess, materials within buildings or ensuring that people are living in safe spaces. Right now, where we kind of are with it, um, we created somewhat of a solution that tracks more air quality because we found that specifically for women and or younger women, um, as like one of the highest causes of death, specifically like in Colombia, is because of I guess like respiratory issues or so that's kind of what we focused on, but we are sort of pivoting and we decided to concentrate more on green spaces and seeing how we can use AI to have monitors that sort of sense like, if they need to be maintenance and also keeping those spaces safe. I think safety was something that among all of us, we agreed wanted to concentrate on as well. So kind of making sure that we have green spaces throughout and places that are safe as well.
Wow, that sounds really exciting, and it's a project I commend the group because you're covering a lot of important areas. I mean, you're covering sustainability, you're covering environmental issues, you're covering health issues, you're covering safety issues, you're covering gender inclusion issues. I think one of the things that I would try to emphasize, if you haven't already, or to put in a component of a public-private partnership with the municipal government and the national government of Colombia and the municipal government of Bogota. I've worked with both. I've been to Colombia many times, and we've had tremendous success working with the governments there. The municipal governments have a lot of really interesting programs, and one of the things that I would also recommend, I think I would give you two suggestions. One is to team up with the university. Like they have great students, much like yourselves, and I would even recommend La University of Los Andes, ANDES, and bring in them, to get that perspective and have them working with you on the data sets and on so forth. And then I would also recommend identifying really good NGOs, non-governmental organizations that could be helping you with this pilot. And one of them that I would also recommend is Pro Mujer, PROMUJER, which works for gender issues and gender equality and works a lot with women's health and women's health issues. So I think you're on the right track. I think that's really exciting, and you're covering a lot of bases, which can also be a challenge. But I think they're all interrelated, which is good.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, group number 7.
Hello. So our project is focused in Vietnam, and we were working with SDG 12, which is responsible consumption and production.
Hmm.
And so we're kind of focusing in communities where excess clothing from factories is polluting like the rivers and farmland nearby, making it harder for people to work. And our solution is kind of multifaceted. So we want to use AI to help manufacturers better predict demand so there's less waste. And then we are creating a system where we're paying local people so the AI will tell people where the textile waste is like the greatest, and we'll pay community members to go and pick up the waste and deliver it to one of our recycling plants, and we'll sort through it and get the good material back to small businesses, and everything else will recycle responsibly.
I think that's awesome. I think, and it's really great to see young people, and I'm seeing a lot of it that are focused on and really caring about not just the environmental issues, but what the area of fast fashion, or what they call fast fashion, is doing to the environment. So you're covering the environment, which are very important issues. And another issue that I don't know if you putting it as a recommendation, but which is very important, is the whole supply chain issue. I would really look into that, because supply chain is, there are victims and they're also culprits because of the supply chain of, the products being environmentally unsafe, or these huge clothing dumps. And another area that I would look into, which was very famous, and it's a case study that I would tap into if you haven't already, I would Google work conditions, factory, Nike, Vietnam. Because another area which is you're touching on is also is working conditions and working rights for people who are producing those things. So it's not just an environmental issue, but it's also a human right. It could be potentially a human rights issue as well. But that's a really, really important topic that you're covering on in a country which a lot of issues they've had, and some of them rightfully so, and some of them unfairly. But I think you're on the right track, and I think you picked a great country to cover and report on, and you also picked a great topic.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So group 8.
Yeah, so for our program, we chose Chad as the country that we're operating out of, and we want to create more of an SMS AI system that can help tackle the issue of lack of education in the region. We want to start by making like after school programs that are tailored towards the specific areas and needs of the children, because we looked into it, and most of the classrooms that are available are for students grades like first through eighth, and it's not exactly tailored towards them. So we want to make sure that the system that we use is trustworthy and very easy to operate and available offline. And when tossing around the idea of uploading personal data into an AI system, we want to make sure that it's trusted in the community. So we want to collaborate with trusted leaders and centers that are already operating within Chad to make sure that the students and the parents feel comfortable using it and be able to increase literacy levels and specific schooling that is tailored towards exactly what the students need in that region.
Wow, I think that's great. I think you picked a really challenging country that and education is a huge challenge. And I really like the fact that you're doing an ed tech project with, and you mentioned SMS, which is so important. Because one of the things that we saw and we noticed, and we were almost forced to notice this, was that you know, limited access, it was such a challenge for people to get education, especially during the pandemic and especially in the developing countries. But for some reason that we know of, SMS was accessible, and a lot of students, even though they didn't have access to many things, many of them had, because of the penetration of smartphones, access to phones, thus SMS, thus WhatsApp. So a lot of the education was, a lot of the kids were completing school on WhatsApp, and the teachers were conducting classes creatively on WhatsApp. And I think you're tapping into the right age, because that's an age that's I don't want to say left behind, but that's needed to really reinforce. I think you guys are on the right track.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Number 3.
Yeah, we did ours on SDG number 3 as well, which is good health and well-being, and we chose to do it in Uganda, and because there's a lot of like smallholder farmers that don't get the right information about the crops that they're working with or the weather that they're getting, and also just like maintaining their health in general, like for themselves. And because of that, they're often making decisions based off of like guesswork, which can lead to lower crop yields, unstable income, and overall, worse health outcomes for the region. And so we'd like want to propose an AI powered platform that would send these simple, personalized recommendations directly to these farmers through like either SMS or voice. So it would work even without them having like smartphones or strong internet. And it would give things like planting advice, weather-based insights, and just basic health information. And so like what we were thinking was we'd want to partner with local organizations and telecom providers to reach these farmers and use AI to analyze things like weather data and local market trends to, tailor the messages to them. That way, the farmers are getting information that's actually relevant to the like specific situation.
I think that's a great initiative. I worked a lot in Uganda, and one of the things that we worked on was sustainability issues, and weather issues was a big area of this. So you're incorporating that. So you're incorporating not just looking into the challenges, but also looking into solutions. And I like the fact that you bring up partnering up with telecom. I think that's really important to bring in from the private public partnership side, bring those players in, because at the end of the day, this might be a cost and an expense to them, but the pros is that they're collecting and going to be gaining future and new clients as well. And the fact that you're bringing in the AI piece, I think is really important, because one of the things where AI can help you is making it culturally relevant and making it so these farmers can understand. Because you take a lot of you want to keep the science in there and the technology in there, but you want to make it user friendly and viable for these farmers. And I would also recommend um, tapping into or considering partnering up with the World Food Organization of the United Nations, or because you did bring up the SDGs, and 2030 is right around the corner. So I mean, partnering up with the UN, bringing in them in from a public perspective, working not just with the Ministry of Agriculture of Uganda, but also working perhaps with the Ministry of Education as well. And one of the things that I would also recommend looking into, one of the things that Uganda prides itself on culturally, and they put such a really good emphasis on intergenerational dialogue. They have these programs they're called the grandmothers programs, where the grandmothers become involved in the process. So they're bringing in their knowledge and their educational and historical perspective as well. No, I think that's a great project.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving them feedback. So
Oh, of course.
yes, so we're really excited about the projects they'll be presenting in a couple of weeks. And so I want to get back to questions. The first question I want to ask you, uh, have you ever worked with a partner and then thought, oh, this is not the right partner? And in that case, how did you back out of it, or how did you push forward?
Well, one of the challenges that we have is, we're and it's we have to be very picky and very careful, because we're funded by taxpayers' dollars. This is funded by you guys. The United States government is the single largest shareholder, so everything has to be transparent and go through what we call due diligence. And technology has really helped us there from a research perspective. But sometimes you make mistakes and you end up partnering up with the wrong type of organization. You want to give them the benefit of the doubt, for instance, but you just sometimes you just don't know. But we've had instances where we've had to work with some shady players from I won't name the governments, but from certain countries, that there were corruption issues. Certain countries, certain companies that had human rights issues as well. You have to be very, very careful. We worked with one company, again, I won't name it, but we got out of there. We got out of Dodge really quickly, because we found out that they were violating a lot of human rights issues with the workforce program. They were making their employees work more hours than they had to legally, and paying them much less than the minimum wage. So one has to be really, really careful, because that's one of the challenges of public-private partnerships. Is you're a government or an international body represented by many governments partnering up with the private sector. So all types of issues are, and especially in the sports world, there's a lot of, unfortunately, we worked with a lot of athletes who have their heart in the right place and have become ambassadors and become very famous athletes, and they get money and they want to contribute wholeheartedly their resources, but they're not represented by people that always have their best interest at heart. So we've had to back out, not because of the athlete, but rather because who's representing them. Whether it was a shady agent or a shady manager or so forth. So yeah, what I would recommend, and I would incorporate into your presentations if it makes sense, and if there's a piece for it, is what we call due diligence and doing your research.
Another question that I have is, how do you, how would you define social impact
Well,
or
that's an interesting question, and that's a
social
great question.
entrepreneurship? And then is there a difference between social entrepreneurship and social impact? Like, how would you define it? Define
Well,
that.
if you Google, for instance, I always tell people, if you Google what is social impact, you're probably going to get 400 different definitions of what social impact is. I think social impact is making your community a better place, whether it's what we call global development. Global is global and local development, and making a difference, whether it's environmental, whether it's health, whether it's workforce development, whether it's education, Social impact is how a community or a person or a country or a state or an organization is positively impacted and how their life gets a little bit better. What I always tell people, social impact is improving lives. Improving lives is and there's so many ways to improve one's life. Whether it's providing more opportunities, a better education, better health, better access to water, like Arthur mentioned his water project, or the project in Peru that's mentioning, infrastructure and road safety. All the projects that are mentioned, have that, component, have that social impact component. And I think one of the things that when people ask me, well, what is the key ingredient? Is it money? Is it technology? Is it government? And I always tell people the key ingredient that's needed is goodwill. It's having that mindset where you want to make a difference, not just because it looks good on paper, not just because it's a good public, program, or it's a good public service announcement, but you really want to make a difference because you're working and you're providing a service. At the end of the day, your stakeholders, your shareholders are the same. It's the community that you're living in as your client, your customer.
Oh, thank you. We have another question for you.
So I wanted to ask, what could be common mistakes that young entrepreneurs, students will make while designing this type of solutions in communities that they might not be directly part of?
That's a great question. One of the biggest common mistakes that I see, and you learn through experience, is not testing. It's not taking enough time to see if the product, if you're making, works, or the curriculum that you're developing, or the system that you're working works. I think a lot more time has to go into what we call, and it's expensive, and I get it, and a lot of people get priced out of it, but what we call R&D, or research and development. A lot of entrepreneurs are forced to cut corners, rightfully so or unrightfully so, because they have limited resources or limited time. In other words, the elevator pitch. You want to really fine tune that, and sometimes if you cut corners, you could get some positive response in the beginning, but if it's not well laid out, and if you haven't tested your theory, you can have a lot of problems. So I think one of the biggest challenges, and it's hard, but one of the things that I see, the common mistakes is that a lot of these entrepreneurs that are trying to create these wonderful startups aren't putting enough time into testing and research and development.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think Sarah had a question.
Yeah. Um, so if you're planning, so kind of touching back on the other question that I had, if you're planning to operate in a corrupt country, when would you know it's time to back out of like a corrupt or shady partnership?
I'm sorry, the question is, when do you know if it's time to back out of the shady partnership?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's too late, unfortunately. You have to really have, I think one of the key components to this, and it's challenging, is you want to have the cultural understanding and awareness. Because doing business in one country culturally is a lot different than doing it in another. So one of the things I recommend to avoid that is to bring in from the very beginning a local partner, somebody that knows the lay of the land and somebody that knows reputations. Because it's hard. I mean, sometimes a company, like for instance, a company could be coming from the United States and it wants to invest in another country, in another continent, that with another culture. And if they come in and they land there and they don't understand the cultural perspective, or they don't understand how business is conducted, it could bite them. It could bite them. So understanding, the way the business is conducted, and doing again your homework, doing your due diligence. And I would start by bringing in local partners, to help you from the very beginning when you design this and find out what you need. But it's inevitable. I mean, one of the biggest challenges and problems of not just the developing world, but globally, is corruption.
Yep. Thank you. I think group 5, they said they didn't share. So going back to group 5 would like to share their idea.
Hi, Fabian.
Hi.
I'm a part of Group 5. We're doing our project on El Salvador. There's nutrition deficiencies pretty prevalent all over El Salvador that leads to childhood stunting. And so we targeted areas in urbanized areas of El Salvador where a lot of people use mobile apps for food delivery services. And so what we would be bringing to the table is in addition to the apps that they already use. These apps would be able to direct users to restaurants based on information that they input into the app. So this could be like their nutrition goals, their health goals, and it will also have a tracker. Another interesting feature about this app is that there will also be a recommendation algorithm for recipes. So local people can upload their own recipes, whatever that they make in their homes, and people can comment on these recipes. They can share their own and give reviews.
Well, I think that's great. And I've done a lot of work in El Salvador and for El Salvador, and I think you picked the right country for a technology project. El Salvador is very advanced for a developing country in technology, especially with their current administration and political leadership. I don't know if you knew this, but cryptocurrency is like the national currency in El Salvador, which is very modern, very cutting edge. So I think you have the penetration and the technology available, and the users know how to use their smartphones. Or there's access to telephones and smartphones there, which is great. And I really like the fact that you're have that sharing component, and whether you're empowering your users to share, and it's bringing it local, it's bringing it home. I mean, it's giving it, even though perhaps you're a foreign company coming in to do international business in a new country, you're making it theirs as well. You're giving them a sense of participation and ownership, which is really important. And you're tackling a big issue, which is health. I mean, it's not just a problem in El Salvador, but nutrition issues are huge, especially for children, and especially in non-accessible areas. And there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, there's cost issues, there's time issues, there's the kids don't have the right enough time to eat the food properly, or where they're eating it, or how they're getting it. No, I think I think you have a great product, and you picked the right country to launch it.
Thank you. I think Isabella had a question as well.
Yeah, so I just wanted to quickly ask if you could share, an example of, a time when you were collaborating with others, and you had to sort of sacrifice like some of your goals, specifically from a sustainability standpoint, to meet their goals as well.
That's a really good question. One of the things that come to mind, do you mean from like an environmental sustainability issue?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I should have specified that. Yeah.
No, that's a very big challenge, because one of the areas, the work that we did was providing access and guidance and training to in ocean countries. That this was a particular project that we had in Uruguay, where they were trying to preserve certain fish species, but a lot of the indigenous community was relying on those fish species to eat. So in other words, they were fishing, in places that they shouldn't legally be fishing in, from an environmental perspective, or from a ecosystem perspective, because these particular species of fish, some of them were becoming endangered fish. So there was a big challenge and a big decision to make, and it was hard for me to be in the middle of it, because how do you? Because you're not stopping. I mean, it's not an issue of telling these fishermen to stop because they're fishing for sport, but they were fishing for food. They were fishing for food. So sometimes you have to come across these issues where they're challenging, and it was a big environmental issue and sustainability issue, because the preservation people wanted to preserve these species, and have them not become endangered, to be extinct. But the fishermen weren't fishing them to just for the sake of fishing. They were fishing to feed their families. So that's something that really made me think a lot. And I had to work very closely with the local communities, work closely, not just with the governments, but with the universities and with the scientists and with the communities that are specialists in this particular topic to come up with a solution. And the solution that they came up with, that we came up with, was they took a lot of those species and they built fish farms that weren't accessible to farmers, but they kept part of the fish population accessible to farmers, but to certain quotas. In other words, they would fish to a certain amount where they couldn't go overfish or waste the fish.
Thank you. So does anybody else have any other last questions? Okay, so I guess the next question, we kind of talked about this in the last class, but what's the difference between a shareholder and a stakeholder?
Well, a shareholder is somebody that's invested into the company and just focused on the company is from the shareholder perspective. A lot of companies are public companies, meaning they're traded on the stock exchange, and they're companies that have investors, which are called shareholders. And shareholders, the company is responsible not just to the bosses and to the corporation, but also to the shareholders that own the corporation. So that puts a lot of pressure on what we call the C-suite, on the business and on the leaders for the business. And many leaders get fired or hired based on the performance and based on the shareholders and how they believe they're performing. Now, shareholders are also included into stakeholders. Now, stakeholders is a wider arena. Stakeholders are the customer, the clients, the community, the government. So these are all issues that corporations and companies have to take into account in order to do business and do business well. In other words, how people have asked me, well, what do you mean a community? How's a community a stakeholder? Well, if a new company has to build a new factory in a small town, that small town might not have the capabilities or the schools or the infrastructure or the utilities to host this thing. So the community has to get involved in this and decide as a community, as a local government, what are the implications. And the company has to say, well, we want to come into your small town, and by doing so, we're going to offer so many new jobs. We're going to rebuild your roads, and we're going to contribute this and contribute that. So that's where you bring in the stakeholders, and then of course your clients, your customers. How do they feel about it? How do they feel about the product you're selling or the food that you're making, and so forth and so on. So it's basically an easy definition for stakeholders is kind of like the ecosystem. Who's involved in the ecosystem of your company or your corporation, and the shareholders are the ones that have the financial interest.
Thank you. So before we close out, can you tell us, like, how do you get the buy-in? Like, if you have an idea or a product, like, how do you gain the buy-in from the stakeholders? Like, what should you do once
Give
you've
them.
already
That's
identified?
a great question, Atiba, and you want to be authentic.
Yes.
And by being authentic is you want to give them a seat at the table, and you want to listen. And you don't want to confess or profess to be the expert and then Mr. or Mrs. Know-it-all. You want to give them a seat at the table. You want to listen to them. You want to listen to their needs and listen to their ideas and listen to not just what they're opposed to, but what they're favored, what they'd like to do. But I found that starting from the very beginning, as opposed to bringing them in afterwards to make it a public relations thing or to make them, look good or so forth and so on. You don't want to do it once the problem exists. You want to prevent the problem. So bring them into the process. And if there is a problem, it was a co-created problem with them in the process from the very beginning. But I think it comes with experience and it comes with time, just knowing. And I think you guys have a good idea of who's real, who's authentic, why are they involved, why are they interested in investing, especially when you're talking about social impact.
Thank you. So the last question that I have, I want to kind of close out with. Um, my hope is that they've taken this class and they have a love now for social impact and they want to spend 20 and 30 years in the field like you and I. What is something that you love about what you do and something you can leave with them to encourage them to explore this area?
I would encourage this area. This area is growing. This area is there's jobs in this area. There's need in this area. There's need for social impact specialists. There's need for people that are interested in social impact. There's, students, for instance, business schools that, for instance, in the past didn't have social impact courses are now incorporating them, like Harvard Business School, Stanford, a lot of the top business schools, and I'm sure Virginia Tech as well, is incorporating, and you have, because you have your class, are incorporating this because the students, the young people, they have this almost built into their DNA. I hate to generalize, but I have to sometimes because I work on these big, giant global things. Is that it's innate? I mean, it's improving lives. Is it's doing good, but it's all doing good for business and doing good for humanity. I mean, it is. There's this thing called, and I would recommend all of you to look into this. It's called conscious capitalism. A lot of big corporations are what they consider practicing conscious capitalism, which is really interesting.
Thank you. Can everybody just give him a thumbs up in the chat, or I mean on the Zoom? Thank you, hearts, whatever. We really appreciate you. This was really good, and I appreciate you as well.
No, I appreciate you guys. Thank you for sharing and giving me the opportunity to share the class with you guys.
Thank you.
Wishing you all the best of success on your presentations. I'm sure they're going to be great.
Yeah, they're a great group. So
Awesome.
okay. All right.